chocolates on Valentine's Day. And I've got a copywriter whose job it is to create copy to go on social posts to actually promote the use of chocolate on Valentine's Day. No surprises for guessing that. What it took him half a day to do, one piece of copywriting, ChatGPT turned out 5 in the equivalent time. What we were doing was getting it to set tone of voice. So we were training it on our website, so it learned the language that we used, how we were talking about ourselves, and after 2 or 3 iterations, it had done a pretty reasonable job at applying that tone of voice to promotions of Valentine's Day chocolate. So our copywriter's view was, the thing it took him half a day to do, he could now do 5x that in the equivalent time, to a standard that when he was running it through our marketing team and marketing manager was acceptable. It was good enough. It was then used on social posts. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're in that creative space, that copywriting space, that can be quite impactful. And again, at some point we need to talk about the data that powers this. ChatGPT is the internet for all the good and bad that is. Mm-hmm. You know, I talked about earlier the ways you set systems up. Ideally, you want it to learn your company, your company's data, your company's tone of voice, the stuff that is proprietary to you. That's where the real value is. And it will ask questions of that data that you wouldn't ask. It will literally shine lights in areas that previously you wouldn't have shone a light, because it's hard for humans to do. So again, copywriting, the creative style, the creative industries, I think get augmented. I'm not sure they get replaced per se, but I could easily see that argument being flipped around. So my experience of what we're doing today with this technology is the creatives, copywriting is where it's at. In the legal profession, it's nowhere near good enough yet, not even close, because the nuance in law is such that one word in a sentence can determine a different outcome for a for a way that is read. So again, different industries, different views, but copywriting is the first one we've seen.
I've got a follow-on point from that, actually, maybe a little poll. Who's started to already be able to detect inbound emails or messages on LinkedIn or posts that look like they've been written by ChatGPT? Isn't it absolutely amazing how quickly we've all suddenly become attuned to that one particular style of language? I think I can even figure out whether it's Microsoft's version of it or OpenAI's version of it, depending on the tone of voice. And I'm sure, John, you can kind of talk a bit about this with your technology as well. So I do definitely think that in terms of how it's changing roles, and kind of to your point, I think like any other tool, doesn't matter any other tool that we use, there will be people that are then able to pull harder on the right levers effectively, to kind of use longer levers to use that in a more effective way. So for example, if they are copywriting, it does sound less generic ChatGPT, which is unbelievably already become a thing in a year or so's time. So I think it's kind of, the more things change, the more they stay the same, in terms of it's about people being able to kind of use those tools really effectively. And that goes to the point I was saying earlier, which is not necessarily the people that you traditionally expect to be fast adopters of technology that seem to be mastering this.
I've got an example as well from the from our industry. So recruiters typically will spend, I think we made this point just a minute ago, recruiters will spend a lot of time on the operational side of reaching out to candidates, chasing them constantly trying to get information, constantly trying to get documentation. Now, the way that a human can have those engagements with people is linear, right? So you have one conversation, then you can have another conversation, and then you can have another conversation, and maybe you'll circle back to one, but at any one time you can only have a single engagement that is running with somebody. With a system like ours, or any system that is a co-pilot that enables you to more than 10x yourself. I mean, we've had a single person have oversight of 3,000 concurrent conversations at once, right? So suddenly we gave one recruiter at the largest social care agency in the UK, one of our clients, the tooling to concurrently have this ongoing engagement with 3,000 people at the same time, with smart triggers in place that they knew when we were recommending that they jump into certain conversations and when they could hand back to the AI. So suddenly you're removing people from this operator role into more of a supervisory role, right? So we're really elevating people and ensuring that the work that they do is focused on their humanity, right? On them being human, on them providing EQ in these conversations rather than IQ.
Would John want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly from what we've seen, just to your point earlier, the quality of AI output is just something that people are becoming quite attuned to. And yeah, I receive a lot of these emails too, and I think one of the big things that we've encountered when we've tried to sell our product is, we've heard AI generates emails before, we can spot them a mile off, it's not something that we'd be interested in. And I think getting to a point where you've got a product that's actually able to sound like a human, it's able to ingest enough data about each individual company we work with such that it is able to talk to the best parts of how they like to sell with their tone of voice, is something that can be quite tricky. And it is something that takes a lot of time. We had to go through many different sort of model iterations to get to a point where we're comfortable that the output sounds human. But yeah, it's coming for you, so be careful. Whilst you may be able to spot one now, it won't be long before it's going to be pretty indistinguishable from humans.
So let's move on from being so pessimistic to something more optimistic maybe. So what are some of the newer roles that you think AI might create?
Silence.
Question. Yeah, like so moving on from how AI could replace certain job roles, my question was how AI can create new jobs, basically, and in what industry?
So I think same as any other new technology, it's impossible to say what the new jobs will necessarily be right now because it's still very early on. I think a number of the jobs will carry the same title, but will completely change in terms of what they represent and what people are doing on a day-to-day basis. I have seen there's quite a lot of companies now are starting to, have something like a chief AI officer or something like that, which I think is complete bullshit. Because it's like having a chief spreadsheet officer or a chief risk officer. It's irrelevant. It's part of the overall kind of technology, and I think making sure that the whole organisation can go and use this new technology, which increasingly is being thought of in particular in the ChatGPT mode. It's suddenly computers can then go and convincingly understand and convincingly generate language in a way that they couldn't before. Is going to have a massive impact on a huge number of roles, whether that's coding, whether it's law eventually. I agree, it's not quite yet. Whether it's any other job that involves lots of language in order to be able to go and get that to happen. What's also not really clear yet is to what extent this new generation of AI becomes a feature that's tacked onto every product, as it's increasingly done, because the barrier of entry, frankly, is so low, and in what areas it's going to become a new product. And by new product, I mean it has to have a right to live in order, it has to do something completely new or kind of change the game in that particular space. And everyone's still feeling their way as to what that's going to look like, and I think that's part of the reason why it's really hard to say, I think anyway, what those new jobs are going to be, because frankly everyone's still trying to feel their way around what impact it's going to have.
So ChatGPT was launched in November 22. So about this time last year I was speaking at a conference, and in December 22 nobody'd heard of it, and in March 23 the only thing anybody was talking about was ChatGPT. So it's it's relatively young in its life cycle in organisations regardless of their size, right? The biggest barrier to adoption initially was the licensing and the pricing. Microsoft changed that overnight about 6 weeks ago, so now it's literally available to anybody for 30 quid a month. And you'll hear organisations who are going to go all in on everybody's licenses and other people who won't do it, right? So for me at the minute, it's augmentation.
Yeah.
What can this thing do better to augment what I do? And the very interesting question becomes, when you're doing your HR reviews and you're setting KPIs and you're setting OKRs, how will that be impacted by the fact that Joe's now got an assistant, a virtual assistant, right? So I think it's not so much today, I think it's augmentation. It's I can now do either more of this, or I can be more efficient at this, or it can take me considerably less time to achieve a similar outcome. So in 6 months, 9 months times, when you're thinking about HR policy, you're thinking about KPIs, OKRs, It's how you talk to your leadership teams about how those need to change to reflect the fact that you've now got a virtual assistant in your company that's remarkably capable if you ask it the right question. So for me at the minute, I'm with you, it's too early. I don't see new fields yet. They will come, absolutely, but right now it's augmentation, and that has a big impact on every employee that you in some way, shape or forms are helping to coach, mentor in the organisations that you work for.
I would add to this as well, like I completely agree, and what it means for, I guess, the people that we're hiring, to give you a real example, is that we're now looking for different sets of skills and experiences. So we just hired a senior AI engineer, and he doesn't have a technical background. He did his bachelor's in linguistics, right? And he did his master's in linguistics. And what was his his thesis was on like hieroglyphics. Sorry, I'm looking over there as my co-founder James.
His specialisation was ancient Norse and ancient Scandinavian languages.
Right. And yes, he did educate himself in data science. But ultimately, he's got this incredible grounding in language. And I think what we're seeing now is that, for decades, being literate in numeracy has been, the be-all and end-all and the thing that was going to get you, the big jobs in the city. But actually, language is making this huge resurgence. And if you have a great grasp of the English language, suddenly you have an advantage when it comes to taking advantage of this new tooling.
Yeah, speaking to some hiring that we're doing at the moment, actually, I've just been quite surprised. I put up a role at the start of this week for an AI product engineer, and I've been sort of really shocked just by quite how much incredible talent there is out there that has AI experience. And it's not typically going to be someone who has a master's in AI or a PhD. I mean, there were plenty of those that have come through. But of the sort of, I'd say, we've had about 400 applicants for the role since Monday. And I'd say at least sort of 90 to 95% of them will have done either some sort of AI short course alongside their job, or they will have some like actual applied AI experience. And I generally just thought, this is a junior role, 60 to 80K, we're hopefully looking for someone that's like 1 to 2 years experience. But just the amount of learning that people have been prepared to do to just get themselves that little bit of AI experience such that they can put it on their CV was actually something that actually kind of surprised me a little bit. I thought there'd be less. And I thought there'd be a lot more sort of statistics people coming through.